Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with science advisor Matt Moniz. We are here to talk about the paranormal, as we are most Saturday nights. It's been a little while since we've been here. You know, the Patriots kept us off the air last week, which, you know, I was already debating whether or not to do the show because it was my birthday last Saturday, and then my favorite U2 cover band was playing locally, and I wanted to go see that.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Then the Patriots had to go and lose the final game of the season, so they had to play wild card weekend. And then I go to the stadium and I have to cover a losing playoff effort. So, whatever. I was turned 42. It's not like it's a big deal.
Well, chance of life, universe, and everything.
Now the same age as Tom Brady. So, although unlike him, my future is a little bit more certain. I think I'll be there next year. I don't know if he will be. But we are here to talk paranormal topics with you. And the big topic of the week was something that keeps coming up again and again in the paranormal world. That would be the Conjuring House, which is pretty close to here, about an hour away, in Harrisville, Rhode Island, a small kind of village of Burrowville, Rhode Island. So I think a lot of people around this area, if you're listening to us from the South Coast, you're probably familiar with that area because right next door in Smithfield, that's where people go to the drive-in.
Yep.
Where families go to the drive-in now, but in the old days, it was not a family place.
Yeah.
I don't know if in your time of, running around as a teenager and going to drive-ins, was it still an adult drive-in at that time?
I never went there as a teenager. I went there in my late 20s, early 30s, but yeah, it was still adult.
It was adult. You went there when it was an adult drive-in.
I'm not going to say.
Were you in the car alone?
No.
All right, this is going to be a weird story. This could be stranger than the rest of the show, so we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But if those of you who have ever been out that way, people always say, how do you know it used to be an adult drive-in? Just look at the sign. This is where it's called the Rustic Drive-In. Look it up. Look up on Google. Go to Google Images and type in Rustic Drive-In Rhode Island sign. And then take a look at the shape of the sign and tell me why you just know that it was an adult drive-in. It's still the same exact sign. It still looks like that. So anyway, but that's where the town of the little village of Harrisville is. And if you remember a few months ago, actually I think it was last June of 2019, the previous owner of the farmhouse, Norma Sutcliffe, sold it to Corey and Jen Heinzen from Maine, and we had them on the show. We were their first interview after buying the house. There had been a few TV reports. Our friend R.J. Heim at Channel 10 in Providence, he's all over all the paranormal stories, and he went there and did a story about it being sold, but they didn't go on camera. They were a little bit nervous at the time about, speaking publicly, but we had them on the radio, and that's when they kind of revealed to everybody that they paid $440,000 for that property.
Yeah.
And, we talked to them about some of their plans, what they wanted to do with it, and one of the things that they wanted to do was allow for more paranormal investigation of the home. From my understanding, there had been a few people that Norma had allowed in. I believe she let our friend Ken DaCosta and Rise Up Paranormal in there in the past. And, of course, she was on an episode of Ghost Hunters in the second season, which everybody conveniently forgets when they start telling the Norma, story points of the fact that, I never had any paranormal activity in this house. There's no ghost in this house. Everybody's just repeating the story that the parents made up for money and all this. Well, except for the fact that you got paid to have ghost hunters come and film at your house.
Yeah.
So we'll get into some of that a little bit later on as well, because it's been extremely controversial for the last few years. When The Conjuring came out, we'd heard this story for years from Keith Johnson.
Yeah.
Keith and Carl Johnson, the twin demonologists that you've heard on Spooky South Coast many times. We're friends with them. We hang out with them frequently. And in all the times that we've hung out with them, they would always talk about the Perrin case. I remember when Spooky South Coast first started and Matt Costa and I were trying to get out and learn more about the paranormal so that we wouldn't sound like idiots on the radio, we took a course that Keith was teaching at South Coast Learning in New Bedford. So it was Keith and Carl and Sandra all teaching this course, and in that course they talked about the Perrin case. They talked about working with, having the case kind of taken away from them by Ed and Lorraine Warren. And then, Keith would always point to that as being one of the most significant cases in his early days of paranormal research. So he was telling us for years, before The Conjuring was even in production,
Correct.
that Andrea's writing this book. You're going to want to have her on. It's an amazing story. And it just so much worked out that we didn't really get her on until the movie was coming out. And then she came on and she shared with us her story. And as soon as we had her on, I start getting emails and stuff from Norma Sutcliffe, who wants to send me all the real information. And she sent me this huge packet in the mail disputing a lot of the things that Andrea was saying in her version of the history of the house. Not about what happened to Andrea and her family, but about the history that they were presenting and that the movie was presenting about the house. So, I get this big packet in the mail. I'm going through it all. Like, I'm not going to be the person to go on the radio and talk about all this stuff that came in this packet. So I said to Norma, you need to come on and be a guest and dispute all this. And we were actually trying to work it out where we would have gone to the house and broadcast from the house.
Right.
For two reasons. One, we wanted to get in there to do it. And two, it's easier than making her drive here in the middle of the night. She's an older lady. Yes. We didn't want to have her leaving here at 12:30 at night to drive home to the woods of Harrisville. So that never ended up coming through. All these plans of we'll do it just kind of fell through. And then when Corey and Jen took over the house, now they've allowed a lot of paranormal investigators in there. In fact, they have one who, a friend of theirs who's staying there. Bill Brock has been staying there since they bought the house. And paranormal people are going through all the time. So there's even like a wall where everybody kind of signs that went there. But so Ghost Adventures went and filmed there. They filmed in early August, and that aired on Halloween. Mm-hmm. And then Kindred Spirits went and filmed there for this current season, which aired last night. Excuse me. So it's been in the paranormal media for the last couple of months, and so that's kind of kicked up a lot of the discussion about the Conjuring House. And one of the things that people have been sharing as they are talking about this case is a lot of the history that comes from the movie, which is not 100% accurate. Even the stuff that happens to the Perrons in the movie is not 100% accurate, which they will tell you,
That's Hollywood.
Yeah, we knew that it's based on a true story. They're going to take some of the experiences that happened to us, and then they're going to kind of do some other stuff for the purposes of storytelling. And I've always suspected, by looking at the way knowing what I know about the true story and looking at the way that movie played out, I've always kind of made the assumption that
it was just Hollywood doing what they do.
They had a script kicking around for a horror movie that was a similar story, and so they said, let's just merge the two together. And they made a great movie. I mean, it's one of the better horror movies that have come out in the last 20 years. And it was a huge success. It cost $20 million to make, which is not a lot of money for a movie.
No, not these days.
And probably most of that, went to the special effects and the cast.
Right.
So, you're looking at probably, something that it's kind of an independent movie almost to some degree, but it ended up raking in over $200 million. It actually might have been over $300 million. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I think it was 216 million.
Yeah.
So it's a blockbuster success by those terms, and it's one of the most successful horror films of all time.
Horror series now.
Well, now it's begat this entire series. So all the Annabelle movies are tied in. They had the Conjuring Sequel, which got even more into the idea of very loosely based on a true story with the Enfield Poltergeist, where they kind of really overplayed how much the Warrens were involved in that. And now there's a third movie coming out this year. So it's called The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, or something like that. So that'll be coming out later this year. But we've had the Annabelle movies, the Nun movies. These are all an offshoot of what they now call the Conjuring universe. And eventually, I don't know where it stands, but I know from what I've heard behind the scenes, Blumhouse, Jason Blum's production company that kind of runs the Conjuring universe, has been trying to get the rights to Amityville, which is currently owned, I believe, by Miramax. But because of all the stuff that's been going on with Harvey Weinstein, even though he's out of Miramax now, he's been out of Miramax for a while, but because of the publicity that's like they're their productions aren't really getting released like they should. So it's kind of dragging a little bit these Amityville movies that they have in the pipeline. But from what I understand, from what I've heard behind the scenes, the plan is for them to make a bid to buy Amityville, the rights to the story, and then include that in the Conjuring universe, which they kind of touched upon that a little bit. They teased it in the first Conjuring movie, and then they touched upon it a little bit at the beginning of the second Conjuring movie, but they didn't call it the Amityville house because they didn't have the rights to.
Now, I'm used to, stories being mutated or augmented by Hollywood on real cases. Good example, Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky, what they did with him. To point out what I'm saying is, what you see that happens to all of the people that are left out in the woods when Travis was taken, the way the sheriff's department grilled everybody and all of the, searching and everything. What happened basically here on Earth is extremely accurate. Everything that you see happening to Travis on board the craft after he's abducted is completely Hollywoodized.
Sure.
Travis's actual experience is completely different than what they
and you know what? Part of the problem is sometimes they can't recreate what the true story is. Sometimes it's just they're limited by what they can do. Other times it's more like, well, we think audiences would believe this more.
Yeah.
Even though it really happened to you, it's all about what the audience will be willing to believe.
What they can sell.
Right.
Yeah.
So the plan tonight is we're going to be joined coming up in a few seconds here by Kenny Biddle, who's a paranormal researcher who has done a lot of research into the case of Bathsheba Sherman and how she ties into this whole story, because that's been a major bone of contention in the Conjuring tale. And then coming up in the second hour, we'll be joined by Amy Bruni and Adam Berry of the show Kindred Spirits to talk about not only the new season of the show, but also to talk about their investigation of the Conjuring House that aired last night, and that I'm sure a lot of people are catching up with on the weekend if they didn't get the chance to watch it live. And they were also there for a viewing party last night. They had a viewing party in the house, so we'll find out if anything happened while everybody was there. And then later on in the show, we'll open up the phones because there's some people out there in the paranormal world that have had the chance to go and investigate this farmhouse over the years. And especially now that Corey and Jen own it, we welcome them to call in and share their own experiences. There's also been some people who have been kind of arguing that there's nothing there at all. And so I've reached out to a paranormal researcher by the name of Chris Barrico, who his group has been there a number of times under Norma's care, when it was under Norma's care, ownership, and he disputes a lot of the stuff that people are saying is happening now. So I've invited him to call in and share what he's experienced there, or actually not experienced there, and we can kind of really do a deep dive into this and start to tear this story apart a little bit. But let's get right into it. Let's bring Kenny on, and I believe we have him on the line. Kenny, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You sound great. And thank you for joining the show. I know we were going to talk about this a couple weeks ago, but the show got pushed around with the Patriots game, but it turns out it's more fitting to have you now because this is Conjuring weekend here. So we've never had the chance to have you on the show before, and it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time because you've built a reputation over the years as being a real no-nonsense kind of researcher and not accepting stories at the face value and digging deeper than a lot of people will.
Yeah, okay. That's funny. No one's ever said that, but yeah, I guess that's really what I do. I really don't take any crap. I look for stories and I find them fascinating, but sometimes the little details stick out that don't seem right. So I get my OCD kicks in, and I just have to research the crap out of it. And unfortunately, that usually leads to debunking a lot of claims that come up because we find out through the research and the documentation that a lot of things aren't true.
And one of the cases that I think a lot of people kind of have the that alarm go off is the Conjuring Case because it sounds so fantastical to people who have actually experienced real paranormal activity.
It is. There's a lot of history that's been spread around. I mean, with the internet, Facebook, social media, stuff like that, I mean, it's everywhere. And I mean, I've seen the stories. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of the bad stories spread far and wide over different. I mean, most of the time, it's copy and paste. Like one website copies from another, and they just stuff out there. So yeah, it's a very popular
So that causes you to kind of want to look a little bit deeper. What did you do when you first saw The Conjuring or first heard the story? What was your initial reaction to it?
It was another story, because I deal with this all the time. I write a column for Skeptical Inquiry, so I'm constantly looking at different TV shows or gadgets or something like that, and trying to test the claims. So when this story came up, I mean, I had known about it for years. I've read about it. I have my personal library of over 2,500 books, and a lot of them deal with ghost stories, paranormal, and a lot of the sciences and true crime and stuff like that. But so I was well acquainted with the story, and I really didn't pay too much attention to it because I just didn't think it was something I would get to. But with the movie coming out and with the new sale, when it sold last year, it got in the news again. So it became something that got on my radar, and I was approached by several people, authors that had already looked into the history and were concerned because they were hearing the stories being recycled again.
And of course, the big story, the big part of it, of the historical aspect, we can't really get into what people experience when they go and investigate, or what people had happen to them when they lived in the house. I mean, that's kind of one of those things that you have to either accept at face value or, be skeptical of, but you really can't get into a lot of the stuff that's happened in the past. One thing that we can look into is the actual historical facts of the case. And usually I can listen to the paranormal side of it as long as the history is correct. But this was a case where the history was kind of all messed up from the beginning.
Yeah. There were a lot of stories that were associated. There's 2 hangings. There's a suicide. There's a couple suicides, and 2 people freezing to death. There's a lot of stories about death in this house, and it just seemed like a lot. So that's when I really wanted to get into it. I started reading other accounts and realized that, okay, some of this stuff isn't really panning out. So not just looking at records online. I mean, that was a big part of it, going through like Ancestry and going through not birth records because there were none for them, but going through obituaries and census records. And I even took a trip up there a few weeks ago to talk to Norma. I actually sat down with Norma Sutcliffe and Kent Spotswood, who is a retired journalist, and he's really researched the hell out of this case, the history aspect of it. So it was nice actually to team up with both of them and get their information and then start verifying the facts, not taking their word for it either. And that was the beautiful thing, especially working with Kent, because he's a retired journalist. He knows the game. He knows that I'm going to ask him awkward questions, and he was perfectly comfortable with it, which was great. It was good working with somebody like that.
And what was your impression of Norma when you went up and met with her?
She's feisty. She's definitely a feisty lady. I like her. I like her a lot, and I really got to say, I mean, she often gets a bad rap from different paranormal investigators or ghost hunters or what have you, because she is very forthcoming. She's very blunt. She's very adamant. But and most of the people I've had conversations with people, actually one with Amy Bruni just a couple days ago. I was chatting with her over text, but people tend to say, hey, she sold the house. She should just move on, and forget about it. And I got to say, like, that it's not that easy. It's really not that easy, because when you have these television shows or radio programs or podcasts or books that constantly bring up the former owner, they keep saying this and then putting a claim to it that is often false, then it's up to her. I mean, she does have a right to defend herself.
Sure.
And try to set the record straight. And you can imagine that after years of dealing with this, it gets frustrating, and I can understand her aggressive attitude sometimes, and I was prepared for that. I knew that she was a feisty woman, but I contacted her. We spoke, and we got along great. I explained exactly what I was doing, what I was looking for, She provided me with the same, probably big, thick packet of papers that she sent you. And I actually I am that guy. I sat down and went through every page meticulously, made my own notes next to her notes, and said, I have to check this, I have to check that. I filled half of a regular college-ruled notebook just with notes that I had to verify to see what was going on, to see if I could verify this fact or this fact. So my impression of her, I like her. She's a really nice lady. She's just dealt with a lot of crap over the years. And I mean, she has a right to be, bitter, if you will. She really does. Like the Ghost Adventures show, they kind of made her husband out to look like a crybaby. And that really pissed me off. It really pissed me off because that's not how it went down. And when you actually contacted her and you got the facts, you verified the reports, it wasn't even her. It wasn't even her husband that they were talking about. They got it wrong. So, I mean, I can understand her hostility.
Right. I mean, and I can give her the
benefit of the doubt.
Not the benefit of the doubt, but I can give her the right to want to defend herself in her own name. Like, if you want to say to these production companies that are coming and filming television shows there, hey, I don't want my name mentioned. I don't want my husband's name mentioned. In fact, I don't really want any loose mention of me at all because it only takes one quick Google search to know who they're talking about. So I'd rather not have myself brought into this at all. I think that that's a fair right to do. Yeah. My problem is that she seems to be somebody who is standing against what's going on there now. And to my point with that is, once you got that check for $440,000,
not your problem.
It's not your problem anymore. It's not your place anymore to decide what happens with the story there. So I can understand wanting to keep herself out of there, but from my understanding, it goes beyond that. It's that she just can't let anybody tell that story at all, whether her name or her likeness is involved in it at all.
Right. Well, there's more to the story that I was able to dig up, but I didn't put out in public because there's a third party involved, and I'm not going to go into it because that person wanted to stay out of it for now.
Right, I know what you're referring to.
Okay, so there is more to the story that people don't know. The general public that is interested in this just doesn't know. So that does factor in, but that's honestly, I mean, when it comes down to it, I was interested in researching the history and getting the history right.
Right.
And clearing historical figures' names. The rest of it is for other people to deal with, not me.
Exactly, and I like that approach. All we can really do is try and make sure that we get as and I'm when I say this, I'm speaking as somebody who does the research for some of these television programs that I've worked on. All we want to do is make sure that we present the most accurate history that we can. And I've fought with network notes before where I've said, here's what's going on, here's the history, here's what's going on. Well, can we say that, maybe it's this? Is it possible that maybe it's this? And my answer is always no. What I gave you is what I have. Anything beyond that is just your speculation. And I'm not in the business of speculating. So,
and I've come across that with a few production companies myself. And unfortunately, not all of them are as honest as we would like them to be. Mm-hmm. And I've run across where they put out complete fabrications of historical events and people. And I've had to go in and do the research. And luckily, these specific TV shows, which I won't go into because it doesn't have to do with this case, but those were really angry, and the locations actually contacted me to help with the research, which I was happy to do, and just prove the episodes completely wrong.
And it sounds like when we're saying that, though, that we're saying that, like it's this malevolent thing that TV networks are doing. And I think people have to understand that for the most part, people running the networks, they just don't care if the history is right or not. It doesn't matter. They're not in the business of it's not a historical documentary. They're just making 44 minutes of entertaining television, and they want the dramatic flair. And the history is nice if it's right, but if it's not, they're fine with it the same way movies are, with just taking some dramatic license with it. So, I think it's important for people to understand that we're adamant about the history being right because most paranormal researchers are historians at heart, but they look at it as, what's the big deal if we twist some of the facts a little bit?
Right. And that's, to me, that's sad. It's sad and pathetic, honestly. I mean, we know the difference between a movie and a so-called reality show. And even though I don't expect the reality shows, because that's what these ghost hunting shows are, I don't expect them to actually be reality. You know, I've seen them work. I've seen the behind the scenes stuff. So I know they do takes over and over again, but I would at least expect them to try to get the history right. And I'm not saying all of them do. I don't want to put a blanket statement out there, but just from my own experience dealing with some of them, not all of them, but some of them, yes, they don't care. And that's sad, because you're putting out false information to an audience that you know is hanging on every word of these ghost hunters and what they're putting out there. You know, so it's spreading misinformation. And from my perspective, it's wrong. And I don't like it. That's why I don't watch the shows.
Right. And I
Unless
really,
I have to.
I don't really either. But one show that I do enjoy is Kindred Spirits, because knowing Amy and Adam, I know how much they are of the same mindset that we are, that the history has to be right. And of course, not everything's going to be foolproof. Not everything is, you know, what you come across as with the history is only as good as the records that you find. So yeah, there's going to be some things that'll slip through the cracks with anything, or some mistakes that will be made with anything. But for the most part, they care very much about getting the history right, and with good reason, because that's what that's the whole reason they got involved in this in the first place, is, at least in Amy's perspective, is, you know, she's a historian more than she is an investigator. She's a researcher more than she is an investigator. And I love the fact that, you know, they're the executive producers of that show. So they have more clout to be able to say to the network, like, no, we're not doing that. This is what the case is, and we're not going to go down this path just because you think it would make more entertaining television. And I'm just assuming that would be what happens. I don't even think that that's even ever happened with them, because of the nature of the program, and the network understands what they're getting. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with a show when they're like, well, we're sending people into these abandoned asylums. Can't they find some demons in there sometimes? Like, listen, every time I try to find a demon, they never return my calls. So I can't say for sure there's a demon there. But
I have that problem too.
you can only give them what you can give them. But the important thing about this case, and I think we got to get kind of into some of the meat of where things went really bad with this, is the movie presents this story, and it's kind of the story that was presented in the time leading up to the movie, that Bathsheba Sherman was somehow involved in this. And I know that you've done significant research into who Bathsheba was. Just really quickly, you know, the movie portrays her as being a woman that lived in the house, which is not accurate, but the woman lived in the house, killed a baby, was accused of being a practicing witch, and was hanged from a tree on the property, and therefore she's now cursed that land, and she was the spirit that was attacking the Perrins and anybody else that went into that house. And I think there's not a single bit of that that's completely accurate, and I'm sure your research probably showed a lot of that.
You are absolutely correct. There is no documentation whatsoever that supports those stories, and it's really shameful. I mean, the movie portrayed it, and unfortunately, Andrea Perron's first book portrayed it that way. Mm-hmm. And I think that really solidified it in some of the literature. So, I mean, I bought all three of her volumes and read through them, and it just really recycled some of that mythology about it. And it's just not true. I mean, the documents that we have for Bathsheba Sherman, we have a, oh man, what do we have? Let me check my notes here, because there was so much I wasn't sure we were going to talk about, but we have, let's see, we have a few census records, we have the obituary, and her will. That's it. That's the only documentation whatsoever we have of her. And she was never an Arnold. She was never part of the Arnold family. And we can trace that through the genealogy, that she married a guy named Sherman. She went right from her Thayer farm, because let's see, I want to make sure I don't mess this up.
And the Thayers are a huge family in Rhode Island. I mean, they're all over Rhode Island.
Right. Yeah, they're everywhere. I mean, that's the problem. There's so many, but they're not related. It's the same surname, but they're not necessarily related. So Bathsheba Sherman was actually born a Thayer. So she was born to her father was there, and her mother was Hannah Taft. They lived on the Thayer farm, and as soon as Bathsheba married, she moved to the Sherman farm, and that was it. She was never on the Arnold farm. She was never on the estate. She never worked for them.
I mean, to be fair, she may have crossed paths. She may have visited. I mean, from what I understand, the Sherman farm was about a mile away. Yeah. So, I mean, she may have been on the property.
We can say may, but I mean, that's we can say she may have visited. She may have known them, but the stories specifically indicate that she lived there and she worked there. So we can say with 100% accuracy, no, she did not. She worked on her own farm, and that was it. She had never been accused of a crime, and that was the big thing. That was the whole witch story, that she had killed a young baby, like a little baby, with a sewing needle to the back of its skull. And I mean, I don't know where that story came about. It actually came out, you mentioned Keith Johnson, and his book that details his visit there was the first one that actually picked that up. He didn't actually blame Bathsheba. He gave a story about an old woman that came to babysit a baby at the Arnold estate and killed the baby. And I think it was more because she was angry at the family. She didn't like the Arnold family. And then in Keith's book, Bathsheba, which was referred to as Bathsheba Green for her second husband, was mentioned as a separate person. So in the years later, the Bathsheba Green / Sherman and this witch figure became one character.
And from my understanding, this is what I've heard Andrea say before, is that information came to them because in 1973, when they were researching this case, that they had a researcher that was working with them then from the Historical Society who had this false information about Bathsheba Sherman being involved in the murder of this baby. And what happened was they were relating that story to Lorraine Warren during the Warrens' investigation, and Lorraine came out with the information of, that's what happened. That baby was killed in this house, and Bathsheba's who haunts this house. So it was Lorraine's kind of split-second interpretation of historical information she was given that led to this legend and rumor for years.
And when you read Andrea's book, it really comes out to the mother, Carolyn Perrin, was the one that had the information. She had the information. She went and found some kind of records that no one else has been able to locate. But she found these records that had the whole story about Bathsheba and the needle and the baby and the murder and all this stuff. She related it to the Warrens. And then the Warrens got up and declared that, this witch is here and her name is Bathsheba. And that's directly from Andrea Perrin's book, Volume 1. So when you read it, she sets the stage. The mother got the information, related it to Lorraine Warren, and then Lorraine Warren made this grand announcement. There was no psychic vision, according to this record. Mm-hmm. It was just information was passed on, and she ran with it.
And this has been the main point of contention more than anything between Norma Sutcliffe and the Perrins over the years. Obviously, Norma, everything ramped up a bit when The Conjuring came out and people started showing up in her yard. When you have all these, because it wasn't that hard to find if you went online to figure out what the address was of the farmhouse. And so people were showing up to the point that we were putting out the call for paranormal groups in the area to go and stand watch 24 hours a day to keep people off the property. It was that bad. So you can understand the animosity that only got even more ramped up. I remember sitting on the stage during a panel discussion at the Ocean State Paracon, and I'm sitting next to Joe Chin from Ghost Hunters, and on one side of him is Andrea Perrin, on the other side of me is Roger Perrin, and Norma's sitting in the audience. And everybody knows, they see her sitting there with her manila folder, her packet of information, and we're waiting. We're just waiting for her to be the one to ask the next question. And when she did, she stood up and she said, "When are you going to stop keeping this BS story going about Bathsheba Sherman being a witch?" And she starts, making these accusations, and Andrea starts crying, and Roger stands up and looks at her and yells, "You shut your goddamn mouth right now!" And like Joe and I are just sitting there between the two of them, like trying to calm them down and hold them back. But it was like all hell was finally breaking loose in what had been going on over the years with them. And I think maybe after that, I don't know exactly when, but certainly by the time she was on Ghost Adventures, Andrea was accepting more of the what we think is now the true history, that Bathsheba was wrongly accused and she had nothing to do with this. So at least that story has kind of shifted over the years, but the movie keeps it persisting.
Yeah, and if you read the books that Andrea wrote, and by volume 2, you start to see the narrative change. And then by volume 3, the blame for the evil woman that haunts the house has shifted from Bathsheba to Susan Arnold, who is another person, Mrs. John Arnold, who first name was Susan. But the blame is shifted to that person as the spirit that haunts the house and is the evil person. So you definitely, as you read the 3 volumes, which is a lot, I mean, I don't want to be mean, but it's way too much. It could all fit in one volume. But as you read through the 3 volumes, you see this shifting of blame that goes to Susan Arnold. And that actually made me laugh, because Susan Arnold is another person that they claim committed suicide in the house, actually hung herself in the barn. And the records show that no, she didn't. She didn't live on the farm. She didn't work on the farm. She did not kill herself on the farm. She did commit suicide, but it wasn't on the farm. She was actually in a house about 4 miles away. Let me check my record here. But yeah, she was 50 years old, and she died in 1866. She hung. Her husband actually found her in a storage closet that was halfway up their stairs. And the obituary actually states that the husband climbed through a window onto a shed roof and went on through another window to get into this storage room, which is not possible with the Harrisville farmhouse because of the way the structure is set up. And also I checked the registry, the directory records for the time, and found out where they actually lived, and they lived in a different district than the farmhouse was. So Susan Arnold, aka Mrs. John Arnold, actually didn't live anywhere near that house. She was miles away. And unfortunately, she didn't hang herself. But she was actually set up. I mean, when you read the obituary, this woman was determined. She had locked herself in this storage closet. She not only hung herself, but she had set up a gun, a knife, a vial of poison. She had laid out her burial clothes in her bedroom. So she was, pardon the pun, but she was dead set on doing this. So there was no stopping her. So that's another one of the folklore tales that are associated with the farmhouse that unfortunately are just not true.
Well, and that's the problem that we run into. Listen, I like all the people that are involved in this case. I don't have any ill will toward everybody. I love everyone. I love Roger. He's a hysterical guy. Cracks me up every time I get to be around him. Love Andrea. She gives the best hugs out of anybody in the paranormal, although Rosalind Bond might kind of, challenge that a little bit. But I'm really, a fan of all these people that are involved. What happens is in New England, we see it happen all the time, and Amy and Adam will be able to talk about this too, because they do a lot of cases here in New England, is we fall victim here to the word of mouth history. Because we have such a rich history here, and because there is a lot of dark stuff that gets talked about over and over again, it becomes the telephone game where people start to accept the history that they've been told rather than the history that's been written down.
Well, I think that's common. I mean, when you look through the entire paranormal community, I've been involved with this community for the last 25 years. God damn, I'm old. But I've gone to I've gone to hundreds of conferences and lectures and events and stuff, and what you just described is common. It's very common. People love they tell the stories, and for some reason, everyone seems to automatically take the stories at face value. There's very few people that take the time to research it and verify whether that story is true or not. And that's a big problem. So it's not just, you guys up in that area. It's all over. It's rampant throughout the community. And I really wish, if anyone can take anything from this, please just do your due diligence. Do your research. Look into the history. See if the claim has any merit, has any basis.
Because you might find when you do the actual digging that you're going to find weirder stuff that nobody's talked about for 100 years that was kind of buried. Again, no pun intended. So
Right.
we're just about out of time here. Before we have to take a break for the news, how can people follow along with your work if they want to find out more about you and some of the research that you've done?
If you want to find my work, you can go on to Skeptical Inquirer magazine. I think it's skepticalinquirer.com. And then just look up my name, Kenny Biddle. It's all there. If you go on Facebook, you can look up Kenny Biddle, and my blog will pop up. I also have another blog that I just started called Sherlocking the Paranormal, because I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes. And that's pretty much it. I do travel around to conferences and stuff in the tri-state area on the East Coast, because I'm based in Pennsylvania, so I go to Jersey, New York, Delaware, and all around. So I might be at a conference. I set up a skeptics booth, which looks like Lucy's psychiatric booth from Peanuts, except it says Skeptical Help.
Do I have to give you a nickel?
You don't have to, but I do take the donations. I have a donation can out, and all the money goes to the cancer research.
In that case, I'll bring plenty of nickels.
There you go. So yeah, it all goes to the charity. I don't make any money off of this, so I just do it because I love researching.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd love to have you come back on and do a full show with us sometime where we can really do some, maybe we can dispel a lot of paranormal myths about some of these cases that you've looked into over the years. I think that'd be...
I would love it. I would love it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will definitely be in touch. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, and have a great night.
You as well.
Bye.
So that is Kenny Biddle. We will actually continue this discussion coming up after the news. We're going to have Amy Bruni and Adam Berry joining us to talk about their research into the case as well, what happened during filming, maybe if anything happened last night during the watch party that they had there. And we can get more into some of this idea, because one thing you'll notice if you watch the episode, not to give you a spoiler alert if you haven't watched it already, but you will not hear the name Bathsheba Sherman mentioned in the episode, and that was on purpose. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk with them about that, as well as some of the other cases that you can expect coming up on this season of Kindred Spirits, and of course the new cast member as well, Chip Coffey, now a full-time cast member of Kindred Spirits. So we'll talk about all that and more, and then a little bit later on we'll open up the phone lines. If you have investigated the Harrisville farmhouse, if you have been there, if you have questions, if you have problems with some of the stuff that's been out there about the place, you can call in and share those thoughts with us during the discussion a little bit later on in the program. We are going to take a break for the news right now. When we come back, we'll have more. Remember, if you have ever missed any part of a show or any of the shows at all, this is like almost number 600, then all you have to do is go to SpookySouthCoast.com or subscribe to our podcast feed on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts, and you can get every single episode we've ever done. So we'll take a break for the news now. We'll come back with more on the Conjuring Case here on Spooky South Coast.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Well, that didn't work out. We'll fix it in post. Welcome back, hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. See, that's what happens when you're trying to do it off the internet because somebody took your theme song out of the computer here, and I didn't remember to have them fix it. So what happened was, as we rebuilt this system with the new automation, I put it in. And I went in and I learned, that's how I learned how to stick stuff into the system, was by putting the spooky theme song in. And I was like, well, now I know how to do it and I can do it anytime. Well, it got removed somehow when we weren't here. You be quiet.
Yeah.
It got removed somehow. And what happened was I remembered how to put it in, but I can't find it from where I originally pulled it. So I don't know what's going to happen. I love the Spooky South Coast theme, but maybe we'll just get a new one made. Our friends who made that theme song have been hard at work on some stuff that I'll have coming up soon that for something that we're working on. But maybe we can see if they can write a new spooky theme as well.
Yeah.
Just a little something updated. And what we do is we use that on purpose so that we can still run it and not have YouTube flag it as being
it's copyrighted.
licensed, copyrighted song. And sometimes YouTube still tries to pull that stuff anyway, and I have to tell them, no, this was made specifically for us. So we are back, and if you missed the first hour, we were talking with Kenny Biddle about the Conjuring Case and about his research into Bathsheba Sherman, who was accused of being a witch and accused of killing a baby and accused of committing suicide, or being hanged, rather, I should say, from a tree on the property. If you've seen the movie, you know all of this stuff, and of course, none of it turns out to actually be historically accurate. So we wanted to kind of clear the air a little bit about that for people who might not, even people in the paranormal world are still believing that version of the story. So we wanted to make sure that we could kind of clear that up a little bit. But of course, the big television episode this week was Kindred Spirits. The second episode of the new season aired last night, and it was all about that farmhouse, but it was a totally different take than what you might have seen in some of these other shows. I know it was on Ghost Adventures, and it was talked about, and it was investigated on Ghost Hunters years ago. But this was the first time that extended members of the Perrin clan were brought back to that farmhouse. And we're going to find out about what that was like with our guests right now. On the line, I think we have Amy on this line. Hello, Amy. Are you with us?
Hello. Here I am.
All right. And hang on. We're going to bring Adam on as well. Adam, is that you?
Oh, I'm here.
I'm so glad.
Well, I hope it is.
Yeah, I'm glad it's you and not Lamone. No offense, Lamone, but I was just expecting Adam to call in on that line. So, of course, last night was the big Conjuring House episode of Kindred Spirits, but the week before was the season premiere. And from what I understand, this season has been even bigger than the previous seasons of Kindred Spirits. That must make you guys feel really good.
Yeah, we're ecstatic about it. It's one of those things where, you don't really realize how big it's going to be until it actually airs. Adam and I are our own worst critics, right, Adam?
Yeah, exactly.
So we were just both very hesitant because every time we try something new or we kind of think outside the box or we dig even further into research and we just, we want to bring everybody along and we just never know how everybody's going to take it. But so far, so good.
Yeah, and I think,
we're 2 episodes in, we're good.
We're now in season 4, and so as we're gearing up for these seasons and getting these cases, more people know what we're doing and know what we're about, and so they come to us with their problems and their cases. And I think it's just a testament to what we do. We stick to our guns, and we end up getting these certain cases, and we never know how the audience is going to take the cases that we do, but we want to speak as truthfully and as factually in what we're doing, and we lay it all out, and we say, well, this is it. This is what we've got. So I hope you guys like it.
And I'm sure it's easier to do that when you're dealing with cases that it's a family coming to you in a residential home that nobody's ever heard of, and most people have no idea that this family's been going through what they've been going through, and so there's less of a spotlight on it. But you've also done some pretty notable places over the last couple of years that you're actually going to places where there is a history behind it that people are familiar with, but you're going at it with the same approach that you take to every other case. It's not so much about what you might have seen in a movie or in any other investigation. It's about what is happening to the people that are there, the people that are involved with it, and how you can try to find a way to help with that.
Yeah, and it's hard because some of them, there's already so much information out there and everything, but Adam and I have both agreed, like, every case we go in pretending like we know nothing, and we just start from square one as far as research. And sometimes it seems kind of like redundant. You're like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Like, this is this information's already out there and readily available, but you just have to make sure. And so we always just pretend like we know nothing and just go in with a clean slate. So,
Adam, how'd you feel when the Conjuring House came up as a potential case?
I mean, here's the tea. Everyone knows what they think they know about the Conjuring, right? So everyone's got this gut reaction when they hear the Conjuring House, but their gut reaction is based on a Hollywood franchise, right? Unless they're really into the paranormal and they've done their own research and they read their own books, right? So getting the opportunity to go into a location that is so notorious was great. On the flip side, you have Jen and Corey, who we've known for a while, who are our friends, who have legitimate claims and legitimate activity in this house. And you have the parents, who we know, and we know their stories and their claims. And I think being able to start from the ground up, to start from scratch and go into that place and do factual research and history and know what the actual history is of that space and say, well, what is Corey and Jennifer having? Like, no spoilers. I'm not trying to give any spoilers away, but what is their activity? What experiences are they having? And does it correlate with anything that's happened in the past? And I think that was the most thrilling thing. I mean, yes, we're in this house that I've, my God, I've wanted to be in that house. I've wanted to be inside that house, of course. But, you have to sort of throw all of that aside, because if you let it get the best of you, you're going to miss things that are right in front of your face, and you're going to try to take the easy route because you think you know what's happening, but really you don't. It's a whole new thing.
And Amy, the question I think skeptical people will ask is they'll say, well, wait a minute. Corey and Jen, they bought this house knowing full well what the history was. They're paranormal investigators themselves. They dropped a lot of money on this house. How can they be reaching out to you and saying, we bit off more than we could chew here. We think that we need you to come in and give us some help. But in actuality, that was the case. I mean, Corey still hasn't been able to move his family into the house, at least as far as I know. And, we're months after when the episode was filmed.
Yeah, so I think that anyone is a paranormal, anyone who's really into the paranormal, myself included, if I had known that house was on the market before Corey, I would probably own that house.
Yep.
But, it's just one of those 100%. Things, first of all, it's a beautiful home. It's on a beautiful plot of land. It's a great neighborhood. It's a great area. There's so many things going for it. And then if you're an investigator, it's got this amazing history. And so I totally understand why they bought it. And I just remember, I was doing the Ocean State Paracon, and Corey approached me there, and he was just like, we really want you guys to come investigate the house. And Corey and Jen both, and they just both seemed very concerned. And it, I know it's easy to say they bit off more than they could chew, but I just feel like they just needed a second, third, fourth, whatever opinion, because even though it's such a notoriously haunted house, I just don't think they expect. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I think we all go into it, like, kind of taking it with a grain of salt. But I think once they actually got into the home, and I think especially once their son started having experiences, that kind of put it into perspective for them. I think we take it for granted a little bit until maybe your kid starts having something happen. And then you're like, oh, wait, what did I do now? Like, I need to fix this somehow.
There's a haunted house here in Massachusetts that is trying to become a bed and breakfast. And it's been under renovation for a number of years. And the owners, who don't live around here, were looking for somebody to live, because you have to be owner-occupied in Massachusetts. And so they said, hey, Tim, we'd like to offer you the chance to live in the house completely rent-free. You don't have to worry about booking the bed and breakfast. We have somebody that's going to take care of all that. You just have to be on the property as your residents, and we will pay your heat. We will pay your electricity. You won't have to pay rent. The only thing you'll be responsible for is your own cable, but we will provide you with Wi-Fi. And when you hear that, you're like, this is the greatest thing that I've ever heard of. Of course I want to do this. And all it took was just mentioning it to my son, who wants nothing to do with the paranormal, for him to say, hell no. And then you look at this great opportunity and you say, okay, I have to turn this down.
Right.
Well, and also
and that's hard because once you do it,
go ahead.
like, maybe you just don't even think to talk to your child. Like, you know, you don't, and then once you do it, you're like, oh, wait, I did this, and they're not happy. And you know, their son is he's so sweet and quiet, and I think that was really what spurned their want for us to come in.
And Adam, you were saying?
Well, no,
Sorry, he sounds so
I was just
quiet.
saying.
This is the first time this has ever happened for me.
It's just the way the phone lines cross. He's still just as talkative.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. I'm like, every once in a while I hear like Amy's like, let's sound like. I was gonna say, you know, you have two people like Corey and Jen who are paranormal investigators, and by the way, openly saying no spoiler alerts. Like, I think they're the two of the best people that could have bought that house and really continue investigating that house, right? But if they had come out immediately and been like, hi, all of this stuff is happening to me, it's like, do you believe them? Because there have been so many people that have owned that house, and, you know, do we believe them or not? Like, what's the activity? What's it like? So I think it was smart of them to get a second opinion about what's happening in the house for the sake of their family. And, you know, for the sake of the community, because this is it's a house that everybody wants to know about, right? So if they showed up and been like, oh, yeah, it's crazy active on their own without getting a second opinion, I think they did the right thing. I think they did the right thing by at least having us come in and start from the ground up to try to figure it out.
And Amy, what went into the decision to try to bring back, you know, the whole Perrin family? I mean, Andrea had been to the house before. I think Roger had been there before, but the sisters it had been a while since some of them had been there. Some of them not since they left, right?
Yeah, and so that was something that we thought. So we started wondering because we knew that the former owner did not have a ton of activity, and so, but then Corey and Jen were having activity, and the parents were having activity. And so we were thinking, okay, is it the people? Like, is there something about like a personality type in that house that makes it active? And so that's why we brought the parents back. And Andrea was a really big factor in that because her sisters really wanted nothing to do with it. Like, they did not want to come back, especially Cindy did not want to come back to the house. To the point that once she got there and I saw like how disturbed they were, I felt guilty asking them to do it. Like, they just genuinely, it was like a PTSD moment. They were shaking, crying. I think Adam and I both just felt so bad. But I think that the way she talked them into it was that, you know, there's new owners now and they have children and they're having activity and, you know, and honestly, I thank goodness for this, but we have a good reputation, and so she was able to kind of stand behind us and just say, you know, these are the people that we want to help, and they want to help the family, and so all we have to do is show up and let's just see what happens, and so that's really how it came about. So it was really Andrea. I approached her about it right away. Like, I mean, as soon as Corey and Jen came to us. And Andrea came to me at the same time at that Ocean State Paracon, I immediately said to her, I think we need to get all of you back there. So,
and I can vouch for this because I'm sitting right next to you, and you're right next to Andrea.
Right
we were
there.
all, everybody's right there. See, I was just wondering if there's any truth to the rumor that Andrea lied to the family and told them they were all just going to Wright's Chicken Farm, and then just went to the
maybe
farmhouse
that's
instead.
What happened?
That's a Rhode Island joke for some of you people that aren't from the area. By the way, I went there after the Ocean State Paracon, and it was nowhere near as good as I remembered it from when I was like 8 years old.
Oh,
So
no. Didn't a bunch of people get like sick there?
I'm not surprised. The most undercooked chicken I've ever eaten in my life, which I shouldn't have eaten it, but it was in front of me, so I did. I was hungry. So one of the big changes that's happened since Corey and Jen took the house over, though, is that there are people that are going in there and investigating more often now. When you guys went and filmed, it was still kind of in the early days of them owning the house, so a lot of people hadn't been in there yet. But last night you had the chance to visit for a viewing party for the episode's debut, and a lot of the people who have been there investigating showed up and were part of this. Did anything happen last night when everybody was together watching the show?
It was
yeah.
quiet. I mean, I think so. Our idea was, I told Corey and Jen, I was like, why don't we make this into something? Because, they've been trying to work really closely with the Historical Society. So everyone who came last night made a donation to the Historical Society. And so that's what it was. And so it was like kind of a nice party, and it was a really happy atmosphere. And I didn't have any activity, but we weren't there a lot. Adam, did you have anything happen?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
Did you have anything happen while you were there last night?
Well, I was going to say, listen, nothing happened that I would classify as like completely paranormal. How to the ever? We were all watching this episode, and
Oh, yeah.
remember this, Bruni?
Mhm.
We're
I
watching the
remember.
episode, and the feed of the episode would stop, and it would wait like 5 or 10 seconds, and then it would restart, but then it would skip over like a minute of information. But the commercials were totally fine. This only happened when the show was actually on, and it did it at weird, crucial moments when we were talking, like when we were investigating or like really delving and talking about this female figure who we think we contacted. It would mess up. Like, could it be the cable? Sure. Could it be the satellite? Absolutely. But it was weird, and we made fun of it. So is it paranormal? I have no idea, but it pissed us off. So.
I'm just going to say it didn't happen at my house.
No.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm assuming it was probably satellite, but when we're all sitting there and this is happening, and it made us mad nonetheless. We wanted to blame somebody. But I think it was really cool to be there with everyone and watch the episode. And the lady that we got to interview at the Historical Society, she was there with us. We learned, she's an amazing human being who, her and her husband, I think, restored graves on the normal. And she was there, and she loved the episode. And, before she left, we were like, we will do anything you want to do to help restore, like, Bathsheba's grave, because obviously it's been, they moved it and removed it for reasons because everyone thinks she's there, which she's not. And we were like, we'll do anything we can to help you because, we want to tell the story. So it was a really fun sort of family reunion with people that really care about the property and really care about the history of that space.
And Amy, I know that Bathsheba was purposely not mentioned at all in the episode because, as you've said, she doesn't play a part in the story.
Yeah, I mean, so we made a really difficult decision with this episode. So every single episode of Kindred Spirits up to this point has featured our research, and because we do a ton of research, like it is just as important to us as the actual like investigation. And the problem here was that everything about that house is incorrect. Like everything anyone's been told is not right. And I don't even know that it's necessarily like done in a negative way. I just think people were misinformed for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have required like an entirely different episode or like 2 hours of our time to go into like the actual history of the home. And it is documented, and it's hard to find. It's a lot of digging. It's a lot of looking at maps. And so we were like, we had this moment where we were like, well, we just need to focus on everyone's experiences here and figure out what's going on and, and document that part of it because the history, as much as we want everyone to know it, it's such a huge chapter that we didn't have time to address it in 43 minutes. And so we really focused on like trying to make activity happen with the parents and trying to see what would happen and seeing, you know, if Corey and Jen were, you know, what kind of situation they were in. But yeah, so we've really tried to actively be on social media and do interviews like this and let people know that, like, yes, you did not see the history on the episode, but we can't stress enough that, you know, what you've been told or have heard about that house is not correct. And especially like this poor Bathsheba Sherman, who, you know, just happened to live on like a neighboring farm and was never a witch or anything like that. And her grave, like, they can't even keep her headstone in the graveyard because it keeps being desecrated and knocked over, and people like put graffiti on it, and so they've taken it away. And so we actually filmed at the cemetery, us like putting flowers on her little nub of a grave that's there. And I think our dream is really for her to be able to have her headstone restored in some way, and, you know, have that all kind of taken back. But that's kind of like a byproduct of our show. And in this case, we couldn't focus on it entirely, which was incredibly difficult for us.
Well, and I mentioned this to Kenny in the beginning part of the show, and I know that both of you are from elsewhere, but you've both been longtime New Englanders now, and you've done a lot of cases both for the show and before in New England. So you understand that this is part of what we run into a lot of the times, is that the kind of the oral history and the rumor of the history of some of these places doesn't always jibe with what you find out in the actual research. But it's almost like the legend becomes fact, you print the legend. These stories just develop over time, and it's hard to fight that with the actual real research.
Well, that's
and we're facing it today on social media.
You know,
people are arguing with us.
Hold on.
We've done tons of cases where, you know, people think they know what the case is about, and we show up and present actual factual, you know, research and history, and we say, well, actually, it's this. You know, we did a ton of research on this case. We went through all of the Arnolds. We know about the hanging. We know about, you know, people that might have died, but maybe not on the property, that were associated with the Arnold family. Like, we went through the entire thing, and you know, we do our due diligence, and I think that's the cool part about Kindred Spirits. Like, we are not afraid to dig deep into actual history and say, look, New England, listen, God love you. It's a great story. It's fun to tell over a fireplace, over a campfire on Halloween, and it's an awesome story because we live for those. But here's the truth, and here's what we know, and look how cool the story actually is when you know, because sometimes the truth and sometimes the actual information is spookier and scarier than anything you can make up.
Yeah. I mean, and like, I actually, like, so Kenny and I were exchanging messages last night, and Kenny's actually helped us on our show before. He's helped us disprove a photo in season 1, which was amazing because that family did not believe it. but it's one of those things where, like, you know, you want to be able to tell the story correctly, and that's so. I was telling him that we, like, ghosts are up for debate. Ghosts and the existence of spirits and everything, that's all up for debate. But on our show, the history is not up for debate. So, like, we can all talk about whether or not, you know, the paranormal exists and what it is all day long. But, like, the facts and the history and the stories, those are the things that we always want to get right, because I think Adam and I are both very passionate about history, and loving history is a really wonderful byproduct of being interested in the paranormal. And, you know, there are people that probably would not even have, like, looked at the history of any of this if they didn't have or if they didn't have an interest in the paranormal. And so let's get that part right. That part's factual. That part's provable. That part, there's records. Like, we can get that right. But everything else, yeah, it's a belief system. Like, that's fun. Let's talk about it and decide whether you believe it or not. But the history is super important.
I did see a comment floating around under, as we're sharing out, getting ready for tonight's show, people are kind of responding with what they thought of the program last night. And one of the criticisms that I saw of last night's show I thought was really odd. Somebody said, gee, for a house that was supposed to be so haunted, they didn't really have a lot of activity. I was like, do you not understand the point of this show? It's not just about the activity.
They took out this clip of me saying, I wish, beds were levitating and I got thrown across the room. Like, I wish that happened. But you know what? Thank God it didn't, because we don't have to go to Corey and Jennifer and go, well, guess what, kids? Good luck.
You might want to ask. It's not too late to try to get your money back, although I think Norma's not going to give it to you.
No, we would have bought it. It's fine.
Right.
But that's why we actually said to them, we were like, okay, we do think it's a personality type, or like there's something here that makes activity happen, because you can't be there with the parents and see their faces and see what they went through and not realize that something very real happened there. And then you can't look at their son who had really profound experiences and go, okay, like, no, that didn't happen. You realize there's something there, and there is a perfect recipe that has to happen for that activity to escalate. And that's why that was the first case where we were like, we kind of think you need to be careful here, because we don't know who this is in the house, which we've never said before, and we don't know what they're capable of. And so it's funny because that kind of lack of activity actually concerned us a little bit, because we knew that there was very real activity that had been happening there for a number of years.
I love when people say, well, can we really trust the parents? Like, yes, because you've got all of these people that tell you the same story of something that happened to them 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. And when they tell you that story, like it doesn't change. You can still see the fear on their faces when they talk about some of the things that happen. And I don't know about you, but I can't get my family to all remember like our trip to the zoo the same. Everybody remembers something totally different, but when it comes to this, they all have crystal clear recollection of something because it was that profound.
Right. And if you look at their case, like from a base perspective, from like start, right? They're a family that had crazy activity that they couldn't explain. Somebody came in and gave them a solution, right? They told them something. And so that family latched onto that, whatever they were told, because they want answers. And they want to make sure that this, whatever it was, right? But I think over the years, they've gotten more information. I think they've, especially with our history and our research, like they now know the actual history of the house and the research of the house. And I think they were hoping for answers. They were desperate for answers. So these people tried to help them in the beginning. I say these people, but we know who we're talking about. They tried to help them in the beginning, but I think they were normal people who had crazy activity, and it stuck with them for decades.
Yeah, you can't look at Cindy in that episode last night and not realize how affected she was. I mean, she was literally shaking and crying being back in that home, and she's never going to go back. She was just like, that's it, I'm not ever coming back here. And, to see that in person, you just realize, okay, someone here was deeply affected by something, and I'm not the person to sit here and try to tell them like, oh no, this never happened to you. So
didn't I read somewhere that she was concerned about your own daughter going to the house?
She was. So whenever we have local cases, I have our babysitter will just bring Charlotte over for like dinner break or whatever. She gets out of school, she comes over, because you've been around like filming. There's a lot of downtime, like you're sitting and waiting for cameras to be set up, and so I'm like, yeah, bring Charlotte over for a few hours, and she kind of hangs out and in between takes and whatever. So she loved that house. Charlotte was all over that house, like upstairs, downstairs, basement. Ran all through like the field, like just had a field day there. Loved it. They also had an Xbox, which was a big hit for her. And so I was explaining that to Cindy as we walked up the driveway, and we had this moment where we're walking up, and I was trying to make her feel comfortable, and I said, Charlotte's been here all day. She's been having so much fun, and Cindy like kind of looked, and she was smiling, and she was looking at everything. She's like, yeah, we had a really good time here too. She's like, and it's great that your daughter had fun. But then she looked at me and her face just went straight, like just really glum, and she just looked at me and she said, "But this is no place for children." And she just walked away from me, like, and I was just left standing there, and she was kind of warning me. I mean, at that point it was too late, and Charlotte's clearly fine, but.
Well, one question that I'm going to ask, and you guys can feel free not to answer if you prefer. Did the previous owners show up at all during the filming?
Yes, she did. She
Yes,
did show up unannounced. She showed up.
She
and
did.
actually,
I mean,
okay.
I can't. Are you who's talking? I can barely hear Amy.
It sounds like both of you are trying to avoid talking. Actually.
No.
Well, no.
I mean, I'll
Listen,
say
she
it
did
like
show
it
up,
is.
and I'll say, like, she showed up in the driveway, and we wanted to interview Norma, the previous homeowner, and she showed up. She was very aggressive and angry, and I think, it fits her personality. She's very passionate. I get it. She didn't know who we were. She didn't know what we were about. She thought that we were just there to exploit the house and to further the propaganda about Bathsheba. But we got to talk to her between her screaming at us. We were able to speak to her and tell her, it's not about Bathsheba. I don't know if you've seen our show. You should watch it. We're all about history and facts. And, and she went on her way. And we would have loved to have interviewed her, but I think she is very passionate, and it was just not the right time for her. And it is what it is. Maybe one day it would be nice to talk to her about it, since she knows what we're. Hopefully, I think at this point there have been enough people online that have alerted them to what we are doing and who we are. So hopefully she's seen our episode and knows that we're not about perpetuating a false history. Maybe, we want to go back to the house. We want to go back and continue to investigate. Maybe she'll talk to us again in the future. I get her, but bottom line, I get her. We understand where she's coming from. And good, she doesn't own the house. I get it. She doesn't have to worry about it anymore. She could go home and do her own thing, and no one's going to call her or contact her about the house ever again. It's just a thing.
Yeah, I mean,
but
it's one of those
I hope
things.
The dialogue continues.
It's almost like what we face, which is you see people talking about you and putting words in your mouth, and it's hard to not respond. And I think at this point, just as someone who just enjoys peace in my life, I saw her that day, and I felt so bad for her, because I was just kind of like, wow, you won't let this go. You don't even live here anymore. And I get it that people are saying things about you online, but this is your chance to just break free, girl.
Right.
Just break free. And it's hard. I know it's like when somebody writes something really terrible and I can't help but respond, and I think she's doing that a little bit. And so I like Adam said, we totally get it, but at the same time, life is too short. She has a get out of jail free card right now. No one, if she backs off, no one knows her. I promise, in a year or two, no one's going to be knocking on her door. People just refer to her as the former owner. They don't know who she is. I would just move on.
But,
it's in the best place it could be now.
But by the same token, I mean, and I know this is before your time on Ghost Hunters, either of you, but maybe you know more than I do. I don't think Ghost Hunters knocked on her door in 2005 and said, hey, we want to put you on TV, because nobody knew about that house then. She had to have reached out to them or let it happen. That she, the bottom line is she was on television talking about activity happening in that house long before The Conjuring came out.
Exactly. Sure. And that's why I'm kind of just walk away, girl. You are a dichotomy at this point. You have this over here that you said, and now you're trying to back away from it, and just let it go, because she clearly thought something was going on there. And yes, I realized that like what she said on the episode, it wasn't like super extreme activity like the parents had, but she definitely had things going on. And we were in the home and we've seen her collection of books and that her husband had and everything. Like they're clearly into the afterlife and the occult and spiritualism, and like it's all still there. She left it. And so it's kind of like,
her husband
okay,
was fascinating.
it's time to
his
just
writings, all of his writings are there. Books on his writings on transcendental meditation, books on the devil, books on many different types of religions. He seems like I'm speaking just because I'm just looking at his library, not that I've met him.
Right.
So this is just hearsay. But like when I look at his library, or their library, I think of them as very cultured individuals who read a lot about many different types of things, right? And whatever it is, but bottom line, obviously we wish her the best, and we hope there's some peace and whatever. And if we ended up in that house again, which I think we should, because we aren't done. I mean, our episode, spoiler alert, is a to be continued. And if she's willing to talk to us about anything at all, like it's totally, we're an open door policy. We have nothing to hide. We'd love to speak with her about her experiences, or maybe her husband's experiences.
I mean, I have to say though, like, I don't know what her best case scenario is. Like, I just wonder,
right?
What is she hoping to get out of all of this? Like, she let the house go now, and so now to keep pursuing it. And I will say, she literally showed up in the driveway screaming without even letting us speak. And so I just can't. I'm like, what? This is what we have, one life to live. And what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Well,
and so I'm hoping she's thinking about that, because we would love, like, we're trying to clear the air. We're trying to get the history straight. So what else can we do?
From a skeptical standpoint, I'm looking at this and saying, I hope that her mindset on this didn't change just because she filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the production company of the film and had to withdraw herself away from this. And even though she lost the case, she's trying to save face by making this total 180 on what went on there before. But that'd be a bad thing. I mean, you definitely want to keep the doors open, because if you're going to continue the investigation there, of course, if part of your theory is that, it didn't happen for her, but it happened for the Perrins and the Heinzens, you need to kind of bring her in. You need to have her be involved to be the control in that experiment.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing here is that even without her involvement, now they now have the Historical Society behind them, because I think that Corey and Jen are very much like, let's get the history straight here. And so now the Historical Society used to hate that house. They hate it. Even when Adam and I went to the Historical Society, they barely wanted to talk to us. But we were like, no, we're not like everyone else. We really do. We just want to get this right. Please talk to us. And so that really opened a whole new door. So now you've got this house. It has interesting history. It's very old. It has obviously this paranormal history to it. It's always going to have this like fascination around it. And so with the cooperation of the Historical Society, and Corey and Jen, like, this can be a very good thing. And so hopefully, like, everybody comes around. At this point, like, the former owner is the only person that is not on board with all this. But this is a chance for the community and everyone to work together. And I think it's going to be a great thing. I'm excited to see the future for that house.
I mean, the Historical Society came to our viewing of the episode. They showed up at the house and were very complimentary and talked to us. So, like, that's a step in the right direction, if anything.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of the future, I mean, what else can people expect in the season? I know, the things have changed a little bit now with, Chip joining pretty much on a full-time basis. So this is going to be, a little bit of a different dynamic than what we've seen. Obviously, we've seen him involved in some of the investigations before, but now he adds a whole new element to what you can do in some of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, so we have Chip. So Chip's doing what he's always done. We just bring him to every case now. And so he comes in for one night. He does his, like, walkthrough. And so he's just, like, one element to our case, which is amazing. It's an amazing element. He blows our minds on a regular basis. But yeah, no, this season is really compelling. Like next week is actually another semi-local case. It's on the Cape. It's a family, probably one of the most like powerful cases we've done in a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam, what else do we have to look forward to? There's so much going on.
There's a lot of cases. There's a lot of cases this season that have not been on television ever, and I think that's a big thing for us because, yes, we like to visit these places that we would like to go into or go back to, but there are a lot of cases on this season where people have who have reached out to us and said, "Listen, there's crazy activity in this place, and we don't know what's happening." There's the May Stringer House in Florida, which is an amazing, amazing case with tons of history, and that's just to name one. But like, there's a lot of cases that haven't been featured on television, which I think is great. It's one of those things that. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. This is one of those things that I feel like people are really looking forward to because there are a lot of shows that do a lot of the same places, but we have a lot of really great cases coming up where no one's gone to, and more families, which I think people really enjoy about Kindred.
And I always go back to the production value of the show. People always will complain like, if I have to watch one more show where they spend, half the show in night vision, I'm going to go crazy. It gives me a headache. I love the way that your show is filmed, the atmospheric use of the lantern light and everything. It's a great way to present this stuff in a way that it keeps it suspenseful, but it shows that it's not this terrifying, scary thing. And once it's understood that it's, when it's unknown, it's scary, but once you can kind of understand it, you can make peace with it.
Yeah, and
we
also,
do it on purpose.
We look better not in IR, and that's
You do. No, we wanted our show to be very cinematic. That was like, even from the beginning, we were like, we want our show to be a documentary style, but also look like a movie. And so, So they've really succeeded in that, and it gets better. The production value gets better every season.
Yeah, I was going to say there's one case coming up toward the end of the season. We get to do the Paramount Theater in Asbury Park, and that location is historic, amazing, and the history surrounding that place. There was a ship that actually caught fire and then ran aground right outside the location. Diving into that kind of thing was incredible. I mean, everyone loves an old theater, but that episode at the end of the season is something wonderful that we can all look forward to.
Well, hopefully everybody will tune in Friday nights, 9 o'clock on the Travel Channel. Just a reminder for everybody out there, if you didn't get to catch the episode on the Conjuring House, but you have it sitting in your DVR, watch it this weekend, because that's what helps with the ratings. And also, everybody's talking about it. So you don't want to be showing up at the water cooler on Monday having not seen it when everybody's going to be discussing it. So, well, guys, thank you as always for taking the time out to join us, and hopefully we'll all get to hang out again soon.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, take care, and good luck with all your further adventures.
All right, thanks. Bye.
All right, bye.
Amy Bruni and Adam Berry of Kindred Spirits. Thank you to them for joining us. Now, I know I said that we would have the phone lines open for people to share any discussion. It is midnight, but I'm willing to go a little bit late, Moniz. I don't know if you have plans.
No.
Okay. So if you do, I don't want to know what they are. Plans at midnight. But I think we can kind of go a little bit longer with this because of the discussion that we've been having. And, the chat room is lighting up on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. And I kind of want to digest a lot of what we talked about here because we've been through a lot of this too ourselves with some of the history of places and the stories that come up.
Yeah.
One of the things that sticks out in my mind, we're talking about how again, it's kind of hard to really trace the roots of where the information came from. We talked a little bit about it with Kenny with the Bathsheba story. But if you want to say, go with what Andrea's talking about now. She mentioned it on the Ghost Adventures episode, which if you've never seen that episode, it's available on demand. You can see our friends Keith and Carl Johnson in that episode too. We mentioned earlier, longtime friends of the show, the first people to investigate that house. So you can see their experiences there with the Ghost Adventures crew. But she talked about, the information coming from a historian that told it to her mother. That information was relayed to Lorraine Warren, who then said, that's who's haunting you. That's who's bothering you in this house. Now, I do think that if you go through the Warren history, and I know that I've been criticized by some people as being overly critical of the Warrens, but in this particular case, it sounds like one of those things where somebody told her that, and she said, yeah, that's it. That makes sense. You know?
You know my first encounter with her, right?
It's all...
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to make this whole show about the Warrens, because there's a lot of discrepancies, but there's a lot of good that they did. And really, would we be doing the show if it hadn't been for people like them that brought this stuff into the mass media? So that all kind of plays into it. But I think that she kind of just made a spot reaction to information that she was given, and that kind of built this legend. And it happens more often than you think that it will. There's a lot of people who were, for years, totally convinced of the fact that Lizzie Borden had an incestuous relationship with her father, Andrew Borden, and that she had multiple abortions, and that the doctor from across the street was coming over and performing these abortions in the basement, and they were putting the babies in the basin that's in the basement, and all these stories that came up. And it's become part of the story when people go, not from the historical tour now, but when people go there to investigate, they'll start talking about that. And it was a long time before we got any kind of backup for that story. And even then, it's still tenuous to some degree.
Well, the only backup they got is what was mentioned in certain diaries and letters back and forth. But
Faye Musselman came into possession of a number of letters that were sent between external members of the Borden family, talking about what happened in Andrew and Abby and Lizzie and in that house itself, talking about all of that. And so what happened was psychics brought that information into the fold, and people just took that for fact for a long time. And even those letters don't really prove anything. It could have just been rumor among the family. Yeah. I mean, people make up rumors about people all the time. It doesn't mean that it's true. So,
especially within family,
and especially something like that, because people would look at it weird that a 33-year-old spinster is still living at home with her parents. And so these rumors probably were rampant at the time, but it doesn't make them true necessarily. And so when you look at the story that these psychics presented, it's become not only part of people's investigations when they go in there, but they get reaction to it. And so now it's become almost accepted as fact by people because of the fact that it draws stuff out. What do I do when I go there and somebody else is investigating? Oh, yeah. I open up the door, I yell the I word, close the door, and leave. Yep. Say, have fun. I remember, I think the last time I did it was to Brian Cano. He was doing his event there, and we popped in, and I yelled it, and I closed the door, and then I texted him, have fun. But that's kind of part of it now. You do get a reaction from whatever activity is there when you talk about that.
I was here with Andy Lake 2 weeks ago, and I brought a couple of young investigators there. I'm working on a project there throughout the winter, both there and at Maplecroft. So, but one of the things that we were talking about is how certain things in that house will trigger, and that the I word being exactly one of those things. And of course, what happens after we leave?
Well, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
But that activity could be because we're talking about that and they're offended by it because it's not true. We don't know. Yeah. Well, but still, it becomes...
It's a trigger. Either way.
It becomes a trigger. Yeah. So, and I think that that's part of what can happen in a lot of these cases. That's why what Kenny's talking about, doing the research, is so important, because you let the legend become the fact way too easily. Now, I go out and I lecture all the time about how sometimes you have to accept the legend in investigation because the legend does become true. But you can accept it and you can incorporate it into your investigation and still know that it's not historically accurate. You still have to have the right historical basis. So I think going into an investigation of the Conjuring Farmhouse and saying, we don't know, we're pretty certain that Bathsheba Sherman is not the one haunting this place. But
we can be fairly certain, yeah.
does talking about it
Bring
change
her
the
in.
activity?
Well, could it also be
She could
the
be
Tulpa
there.
effect?
It could be. I mean,
Yeah, it's a number of
but
these.
before we even dive into that,
Okay.
maybe it is Bathsheba Sherman's ghost that shows up and doesn't
she's-
like the fact that people are
Yeah.
accusing her of things
Right.
that she didn't do. You know, like we have this obsession with the idea that ghosts have to haunt the places where they lived. Not true at all. Because if that was the case, why do we have to worry about what follows us home? You know, like we see this all the time when we've had it happen on our own investigations where spirits from other places reach out to us in completely different locations. So, and I'm sure Amy and Adam and anybody else can tell you that the same thing has happened to them. So we have this obsessive idea with, well, this person never lived on the property, so therefore they can't haunt it. Absolutely, they still could. We can't say that that's not the case.
Just because they didn't live there didn't mean they didn't like the place or have an interaction.
Or even that they were brought into it.
Right.
You know, we've heard the story.
Summoned,
You
so
and
to
I
speak.
heard the story years ago before I was into this stuff. But, you know, we've talked about it over the years. There used to be a certain bar that you and I would hang out at.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a guy who did not live there, but he stayed
Oh,
there when
yeah.
he died because
I saw him.
in the days that he was there, he was a frequent customer.
I saw him.
when it was a bordello, and he was their most popular customer, and so when he dies, I mean, I think they said that he might have died in the act in the house,
Yeah.
but still,
Yeah.
you know, you can go to the places that you loved. You don't have to be tied to the places that you died or that you lived. That's and I feel confident saying that, even though we really don't know if
We'll
it's true or
call
not.
that guy Charles just to give him a name. You know, when he died, the place wasn't his.
Right.
He, like you said, he just frequented it, and he had been seen for what 50-something plus years in the place. And I knew the story, and I knew the place was haunted. But and it's one of the clearest full body apparitions I've ever seen. I mean, this looked like a regular person walking behind the pool table, and the people playing pool were watching him, and the guy next to me, we all watched him, and then he just walked right through the wall.
I especially don't want to get into it on the air because there's stuff going on
Okay.
amongst the kind of people that frequented there and some of the people that wouldn't have been allowed in there, if you get what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a tinderbox right now with some of the stuff that's going on. So I don't want to get too into it. Let's just say that the people that frequented this bar were not the kind of people that were prone to fantasy.
No.
They were not going to turn around and, you know, make up a story. Like if they tell you that they saw something, like you have to take that seriously because this was a no BS kind of place.
Yeah.
So, and that's about as deep as I want to get into
Yeah.
it just because of some of the other stuff that's going on externally. But the Chuck in the chat room, not Charles, use a different name. So but the idea of it having to be somebody that lived there, I mean, obviously 9 times out of 10, it's probably the case, as Amy and Adam can prove in the cases they've investigated for Kindred Spirits. But, you know, if enough people are talking crap about Bathsheba Sherman, maybe she does show up to say, stop talking about me. What I find interesting is that, and I guess he's not going to be able to call in. I think this is Lamone on hold, so I've been waiting for the end before we talk to him. Because I just don't want to derail the conversation.
Right.
But the person that I invited to call in, he's another paranormal investigator. And Chris, if you're listening, you can call in, please. This would be a great time to call in and discuss before we hang it up for the night. He has gone there and investigated the house many times when it was under Norma's ownership. He is somebody who takes issue with places being portrayed on television and in movies, and some of the stuff that changes when they change the story. I want to reiterate to people that I don't know anybody in the paranormal world, anybody that works in the quote-unquote paranormal field, as much as I'm starting to hate that term, that intentionally changes the history, makes up activity, does any of that. You know what I mean? I know people that go into these episodes with the greatest of intention and then stuff gets edited, stuff gets changed. It's out of their hands.
Right.
Unless you're Amy and Adam and you're the executive producer of your show. I don't know what Ghost Nation's involvement is, like how, what roles that the investigators there have in terms of production. I haven't had a chance to look at the credits yet. Grant with the new version of Ghost Hunters, I'm sure he's serving an executive producer role. And Zach with Ghost Adventures. Like, unless you're somebody that has one of those high up positions in production,
yeah,
you really don't have a lot of say in the actual production. And then I can't picture a scenario, at least based on my own experiences, where a production company is going to say no to a network when the network sends down notes. The production company always says yes to the network because the network's who pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to fight with them and say, oh, no, we can't do that. We can't change that. We can't do this. We can't do that. So the investigators go into this with the best of intentions, and stuff gets bastardized well beyond their involvement in it. So let's just put that out there as a possibility. Now, you can say that there's people that might be investigating on some of these shows that are shoddy investigators. The ones that I've investigated with, that's not the case. But maybe it's possible. I don't know everybody on all these new shows and everything. Maybe that's possible too. So maybe you're thinking things are paranormal when they're not. But for the most part, there's no ill will and no bad intention going into the production of these shows and the investigations that are happening on them. One of the other things that people need to realize too is just because stuff doesn't happen when you go and investigate it doesn't mean stuff can't happen there.
Yeah.
How many times did we go on Legend Trips events where we heard these places were insanely haunted, and then we came in with this large group of people and maybe things didn't happen?
Several times. Yeah.
More often than not, we always had stuff going on, even with large groups, but it's entirely possible that places don't react well.
There's been other times where we packed a place and the place has gone insane.
Right.
So it's like, the paranormal is a paranormal. It's like a cat, not a dog. A cat does what it wants when it wants. It doesn't perform tricks like a dog does.
Not everybody wants me to come into their house. There's probably a lot of, living people that were like, I don't want Tim coming over, which is fine because I really don't like going to people's houses. But not everybody wants me in their house. And maybe when I go to visit some of these haunted places, the ghosts don't want me in their house either. It's entirely possible for plenty of groups to go, like, all right, the paranormal group that investigated the Murdoch Whitney house first came out and said, there was some stuff, but I don't think there's a lot of stuff going on there. We were the second group to ever go in and investigate that place. And what happened? Crazy activity with 65, 70 people in the house.
Yeah.
And, we had legitimate, real experiences as part of that. It's like what Amy and Adam were talking about. Sometimes it'll happen to certain people and not to others. There's a recipe that we don't understand yet. So whenever I see a paranormal group ever try to say that a place isn't haunted,
because nothing happened when they were there,
my first reaction is, no, I can't take that as being, just like I really don't take it when they say a place is haunted. Now, if enough people say
it. Is a lake not have any fish if you go there and you didn't catch anything that time?
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
I'm a terrible fisherman. I suck at it. And I know there's thousands of fish in the pond in my neighborhood.
You can have $1,000 reel and a $500 pole and the best bait and whatever.
And I've never caught a fish.
Right.
My son has had far more luck. He's better at it than me. But I can't catch a fish there to save my life, knowing that they're there.
Yeah.
And what is that a reflection of? I'm just not a good enough fisherman to be able to catch one.
It may be part of it, or it may be just your timing and
but either way, it's me.
That's what fishing is.
It's me. It's the situation that I was in that time. Yeah. It's whatever. But it's me. It's not the pond. And that's what happens with some of these places. And I don't like it when a group can say, we have to discount all these other experiences that people have had because when we went in there, we didn't have any experiences. Who the hell are you to be the end-all, be-all as to whether or not stuff happens? And I don't want to get off on a little bit of a soapbox here, but the guy that I wanted to call in, this is what he does. You know, he just says anybody that has an activity in a place where he didn't get any is a liar.
That's BS.
Right. And it's...
especially if you're trying to claim to be scientifically investigating something. Yeah, okay. 99% of these people have no idea what
this is. And to be honest with you, this is an argument that, you know, trying
that could go a
not
whole
keep
nother
this show
hour.
going on forever. But let's stop with the science. Let's stop.
No, it pays my bills.
Well,
you mean
for your day job, sure. But 30 years now, over that, you've been investigating from a scientific perspective. Where's it gotten you?
Headaches.
What have most of your most profound experiences been? Experiences, right?
Yeah, and that's what I can record them and stuff like that. But to me, I've established it for myself that it's something legitimate because I've been able to have repeated results. Because that's what science is actually about. I can predict a certain amount of activity. Can I say it will happen on this time? No, you can't.
And I'm not saying science shouldn't be part of it, but I'm saying like we can't depend on it to be what's going to prove this stuff overall. We've given it a chance.
Well,
we've given it a really solid chance.
As somebody that works with the stuff regularly, no. Most of the stuff that's happening in the paranormal research is haphazard at best. Science works on basically protocol. There is no established, accepted protocol, universally accepted.
So you establish one.
Well, that's just it. Trying to get everybody to agree, and regular science says this is a hard thing to do as well.
Put that aside.
Okay.
The world says Matt Moniz is going to come up with standards and protocols for paranormal research, and we're all going to follow it. And you put it into play, and we do it. We all investigate in the way that you've designed. We all come up with results. We all are able to have repeatable results. Now we bring those results to the general public.
Yep.
What's the general public say?
Oh, the general public just wants to, have the flash of it. Yeah.
I was going to say 30% maybe, but I don't even want to put a number on it. A percentage of people will have their minds changed by science, but it's not going to change everybody's mind.
No, because everybody has their own opinions, period. And believe it or not, opinion factors a lot in science.
You can come up and, tell me the existence of, bacteria, and I can take your word for it because I don't have an emotional investment as to whether or not bacteria exists. I don't have a religious reasoning for whether or not bacteria exists. So I can buy a lot of what you tell me about bacteria because I'm not emotionally invested in it. People are too emotionally invested. Even if they say, I don't believe in the paranormal, they're already invested enough to say, I don't believe in that. It takes a pretty good emotional response to something to say, I don't believe in it. I mean, it's not an easy thing to be against it.
Oh, I've had full-blown skeptics. They're not even really skeptics. They're technically cynics, but, brought them into a place that has had activity, and I've had, jaw-dropping stuff happen in front of them. They freak out. 2 minutes later, that didn't happen. What do you mean?
Right.
I got audio and videotape of you screaming like a 5-year-old schoolgirl. Okay.
I was mistaken.
Yeah.
But that's where we're at with it, where people are too emotionally invested in whatever it is that they believe to really have their mind changed. It's like trying to tell somebody on the opposite political spectrum of you right now why they're incorrect in something. It just, the facts don't matter anymore. You've reached the point where you're emotionally invested, so facts aren't going to change your mind. It has to be an emotional response that changes your emotional response, which is why I always say, I can get the best piece of evidence, data, but I can get the best piece of it, whatever. and show it to the entire world, and what's it going to prove? I'm doing a better job of spreading the word that hauntings exist if I'm taking one person at a time out to have their first paranormal experience than I am to try to show millions of people a piece of data that I collected on an investigation.
We've done that countless times with our, spooky events and legend trips. People that have never had experiences have had them, and it's changed quite a few people in their opinions and their views.
The question I get asked, Tim, when you guys have an event, why don't I see you, walking around with a camera or walking around with this or doing that or doing this?
Because we're watching you.
Because I've already made up my mind.
Yeah, we're watching your reactions.
I'm here to help other people make up their minds. And I'm not trying to force it on anybody either. It'll happen for you if it's meant to happen.
Right.
So, but anyway, that's, we can get deeper into that some other time. I think we're probably going to wrap it up here. So let's go to the phones and take our final caller. Hello, you're on Spooky South Coast.
Hey, what's shaking?
What's going on? How's that phone before we get going into this?
It's pretty good if you ask me.
That doesn't sound so good. Lamone, we got to break this down. Do you hold on? Bear with me here for a minute. We're going to fix this problem right now, here and for good.
All right.
You're on a cell phone, right?
Yeah.
And that cell phone, are you on a Wi-Fi network in your house?
No. I don't use Wi-Fi. That's too dangerous.
Do you have a Wi-Fi network? You don't have a Wi-Fi network in your house?
I've got my network, my Sprint network. I don't need to use a Wi-Fi unless I'm overseas or somewhere like that.
But is there Wi-Fi in your house?
I can get Wi-Fi, but it's kind of dangerous.
Because
I'm right near a fire department. I'm not trying to get the fire department to get off my business and stuff.
I'm just wondering if your phone is picking up interference from a different network, that you're trying to be on the phone and it's trying to connect to Wi-Fi, or if you're on Wi-Fi and it's trying to connect to the mobile network. That's what I'm trying to determine here. But you're on the cellular network in your house with no Wi-Fi network interfering with it.
Well, right now I've got YouTube channel. I was watching the thing, and while I was listening to it, so I was watching the live, not the live, but the live with comics and stuff like that.
Right. So
I was doing it.
Do you what kind of phone do you have?
I have a Sprint, a Samsung.
Okay, so it's an Android phone. So just make sure that you turn off the Wi-Fi calling option on it, so that it's only picking up the cellular network, and maybe that'll boost your network a little bit, so it'll sound better.
Okay. Does this sound okay right now?
You sound better than usual right now. So.
I thank you. I'm glad. Okay, so
let's clarify that. Your reception sounds better.
That's
okay.
it. He took that shot, not me.
Okay, I'll take another one for everyone else too. All right, so what I was saying is, how you can get jerseys for every age you are. Like if you're 40 years old, you get a jerseys for 40 with 40 on the back.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get jerseys with 42 on the back, and you know that.
No.
They don't. Baseball, football, basketball. They don't do it anymore because they retired.
They retired it across all sports for Jackie Robinson. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Except for soccer, they don't do the back for soccer. I haven't seen any 42 in soccer. Can't say that either, but yeah, that's pretty cool. So.
I still remember when Michael Vick got caught up in that whole thing where he was referring to himself as Ron Mexico. And I went on the Atlanta Falcons website and tried to buy a Ron Mexico jersey.
How much? What number was it?
Whatever his number was, but they wouldn't let me do it.
Seven.
Putting Mexico on the back of the jersey was one of the terms that was blocked by the NFL.
Even they go over and play in Mexico City.
Yep, but they wouldn't let you do it because they put in certain terms to block it. So there's certain words that you can't get put in on an NFL jersey. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
You know, like how they put the stickers, like in college football, they have stickers like that with the Mexican on the back of the.
Mm-hmm.
That's about as far as it goes like that. So I sure wish I could talk to Amy and I had a couple types for them, but I wait till I get to talk to them again whenever.
Yeah, hopefully next time we have them on, we'll get them in the studio. It's just they both, were traveling last night to get to Harrisville, so I didn't want to say to them, "Hey, can you guys come to the studio?" But if you've heard Amy on the show before, she always likes to come in. And Adam lives a little bit further away from us. He's probably about 2 hours away.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder for him to come in studio. But she's a little bit further away now, but she's still pretty close. I just knew that they had a late night last night, so I said phone is perfectly fine.
And their phone sounded worse. That connection sounded worse than I do.
Well, what happens is
Matthew?
The more phones we put into the system, the more the signal degrades. So I didn't want to take the risk of throwing a third phone in there and having it really, really drop out. Again, everything I know I've said this, but everything is going to get redone. The construction people have been here. I'm going to show Moniz after the show what they've been doing in the back. It's going to blow his mind.
I saw some of it.
But they're putting in some new offices, and then when they're done with that, they're going to redo the newsroom, and then when that's done, they're going to come in here and redo this studio. So eventually,
we're going to get a board from this century?
This was getting replaced with something that works better with the automation program, and then some week you're going to tune in and you're just going to see that we're all completely shifted in the way that we're sitting.
Oh.
So
time to go all Latino, all white. So Spanish channel then.
I think I'm better off that I cut out right there and I didn't get all of that. All right, well, we're going to let you go, Lamone, because we have another call that we want to squeeze in before we hang up.
Good grief. Like I said,
see, this is... We're losing you completely.
Okay, I remember. It's Bigfoot. But talking to Matthew and stuff like that about going and saying Bigfoot. I've got
if you come out here, I'll take you squatching.
Okay, but I wouldn't mind squatching. And it's like, another thing. Yeah, when I go to haunted places and stuff like that, a lot of times ghosts,
I think you just completely cut out.
I'm just gonna drop him off there. Sorry, Lamone, but the call was degrading to the point where we couldn't understand what you were saying. And I want to squeeze in one more call here before we call it a night. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast.
Good evening, Tim.
Hello.
I didn't realize you were on tonight until I caught you a little while ago.
Yeah, we were going a little bit overtime here, but we were on from 10 to midnight. We'll be on next week, too. We should be back in the mix pretty regularly now that football's over. Or at least Patriots are over.
I wanted to give you an update.
People were asking in our chat room. They were hoping you were going to call in with an update, so I'm glad that you did.
Okay. I was to receive this Millions this past Wednesday, but I had to decline only because my father passed away.
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
So I will be, in the not-too-distant future, probably within a week, I should be gathering everything.
And so they're bringing it to you, or you have to go to them?
Oh, they're bringing it to me. And I sort of tallied everything up, and it's going to be like $200 million and about 16 vehicles.
16 vehicles? You can only drive one at a time.
Well, many of them include a Mercedes and another vehicle. There are about 6 smaller sweepstakes that include a Mercedes C-Class and another vehicle.
If any of them are a Dodge Charger or a Dodge Challenger, let me make you an offer.
Okay, well, we'll think about that because
Okay.
because originally one of the things that I hit was the Hawaiian Powerball.
You hit the Hawaiian Powerball?
Yeah, and I never played it in Hawaii either.
I thought Powerball was like nationwide.
I guess it is, but apparently I was getting calls on my phone from Honolulu, and I ignored them, and they sent me a text message. And that particular one was for $400 million, and they wanted to give me the one-time payment, which I declined because with the one-time payment, I was only going to get, if I was lucky, I was only going to get like maybe 175, maybe 180 million, because they take everything out in tax.
Sure, yeah.
But in that Powerball alone, there's a Mercedes and a Malibu, 10,000 gallons of gas on a gas card, a Red Lobster gift card. There's a bunch of stuff with it. That alone.
I'm sorry to laugh, but
Red Lobster.
If you're getting all this money and you're going to go to Red Lobster, man, you got some problems.
Well, that's what is included in the thing. But I was surprised that. But I mean, and $1,000. I also included $1,000 shopping spree at Walmart.
Wow.
And that's only one of the
Do me a favor
contests that I hit.
Yeah, donate those to somebody that could use them. With 175 million, you don't need to be shopping at Walmart or eating frozen lobster from Red Lobster anymore.
But you see, I'm not getting the annuities, 20 million a year for 20 years.
I'm pretty sure you can still probably not shop at Walmart or eat at Red Lobster with that.
Oh, I know.
I mean, we're in New Bedford, the best seafood in the world.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the Red Lobster in Dartmouth didn't last.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I realized that we live in New Bedford. That's why, like, whenever I go to Foxwoods with a friend of mine, I always go to the seafood section first, and he hits the prime rib, and I said, "Hey, man, you're from New Bedford. Don't you get any seafood?"
Right.
In fact, like I said,
Foxwoods buffet where we can all eat like we won 175 million.
Well, like I say, I was hoping to be celebrating today down at the station, but maybe it'll be Saturday of next week.
All right. Well, we'll be here. I'm very sorry for your loss, and hopefully, hopefully everything is okay with your family and everybody's doing well.
Oh, everybody, as far as I know, everybody's doing well. But it's been like this past month has been like a series of funerals. But
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
Let me ask you a question. Are you a big supporter of the arts?
Yes and no.
Do you like?
I said,
do you like theater?
Do you like going out to see a nice show in the theater?
Oh yeah.
All right, because we have a nonprofit theater company on the Cape that, if you're looking to make a wise investment, or maybe you're just looking to park some of that money so that you don't have to pay all the taxes on it. Nice nonprofit theater company on the Cape that's
run by a friend of ours.
Looking for some financial backing.
See, what's nice is that all these sweepstakes that I've won, like the Powerball, they want it to be tax free. So what I have to do is send $600 in for the Powerball.
Do me a favor. Do not send anybody any money.
Yeah.
This is where you ran into trouble before.
No, but you see, I ran into trouble before because I had gotten letters in the mail. They notify you by phone if you win something. If you get anything in the mail, that's where the hoax is. All of these contests that I won, and of course, I got into trouble because I was dealing with people. You see, once you win something, your name goes online on the internet, and what happens is people grab that information and they call you up, and then they say that they represent. Like I had people representing Homeland Security, FBI, Justice Department. Until I sat down and called the Justice Department myself and had a lot of these people investigated. Many of them have been arrested. There was a network of 30 people that were scamming me, that were arrested on the southern border.
On the southern border?
Yep, on the Mexican border. They were doing
in
all
Mexico
their work.
Or in the United States?
In the United States, but on the border. They had something like 27 people that they arrested there. And the last guy that they were trying to get, he was impersonating a judge. And they sent a drone after him at like 4 a.m. And the guy was armed with I think he had an AR-15, a 45, and a 38. And before he could even get a shot
I got that in my car. I'm being facetious. I only have the 45.
Hey, that always works, though.
Yeah, it does.
I would just be careful about sending any more money. I mean, my understanding has always been they take the taxes out of the winnings.
No, they don't. You have to pay the tax. If you don't pay the taxes, you don't get the prize. So, like, I could say to them, well, I'm not going to pay the taxes, and they would say, well, you're not going to get the prize, and then they would forfeit the prize to somebody else.
I don't know. I know. How much money have you given over now? Through the whole process of trying to claim this prize since it all started, how much would you say that you've given over?
Oh, I can tell you almost to the dollar, but it was people that were representing themselves as law enforcement people.
I understand. Yeah, where it got kind of
about 10,000.
So, and did you have $10,000 in the bank that you weren't using? That you could just.
Oh no, this was a total of over the 3 years, because what they did is they were taking me for approximately three quarters or more of my pension that came in every month. Is what they were doing.
So this is money that you needed to survive.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like, you're. It's not like it was just, money you were putting away for a rainy day. Has your life been
yes
affected?
and no, because I was living on it.
Right. So has your life been changed for the worse by having given up this money?
I would say a little bit, but you see, I'm getting all that reimbursed because one thing that happened was the fact that the money that I sent out stayed in the United States, because I was getting calls from Jamaica, which I ignored, and I was getting calls from other countries. And when I sat down with the Justice Department and different law enforcement people that I called myself, they told me that since the money did not leave the United States, that would all be reimbursed. And what I was initially waiting on was there was a lawsuit because they tried to wire me. I say they tried to wire me. They were going to wire me $40,000 back on Labor Day of this year. And what happened was a U.S. senator blocked it. So the Justice Department lawyer went after this U.S. senator, who I don't know who it is, which I'm waiting to find. I'm curious to find out because they keep it all hushed. But when he came, he didn't tell me the results until he won. The results of that case was $114,180,000, and that is all completely tax-free because it's a lawsuit. Well.
Again, it's been a struggle for you, and I know that things have changed. Hey, the last time I checked, though, the house in Sandwich is still available, the Dillingham house. So. Oh yes, and then I've also looked into. Apparently, they're also selling the Lizzie Borden house, which I intend to buy for my younger sister because she wants to do a bed and breakfast. I'm gonna have to reiterate again. Yeah, neither one of the houses are for sale.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No, so what,
correct.
I think where the confusion came was the second house that she had, the Maplecroft house that she moved in after the murders, that was for sale a few years ago, but the people that own the Lizzie Borden house where the murders happened bought that house as well. So Matt was saying earlier he's actually been investigating both of them. So it's the same people that own both now.
Because I went on to look online to look at where the murders were, and apparently from what I could get online was the fact that it was for sale because it needed repairs to come up to code, and she couldn't have because of the zoning, she couldn't have a souvenir store.
That was the other house. That was Maplecroft. Yeah. The house from after the murders. That was the issues that they've run into there, where they wanted to turn it into a bed and breakfast, and it's not zoned to be a bed and breakfast, and they can't get the zoning changed. So what they've been doing is they've been renting it out as an Airbnb. So people can rent the whole house out for the night to stay instead of just renting one room. And so that it makes it so that people can still stay there and experience it. But neither one of those houses are technically on the market. But Leanne has always said, if anybody wants to make her an offer, she'll listen. I think she said that her starting price is something like $5 million. So, which is, a lot more than it's valued at.
That's odd because the Lizzie Borden house where the actual murders took place, when I looked at it, they wanted a little over $800,000, but it needed repairs to the back porch and something else, it said.
Well, I think that was probably the other place. But both of them now are owned, and there's plans for them. So unless you come in with a really bowl you over offer, which it sounds like you'd be able to make if you wanted to, but unless you make one of those, I can't really use the term on the air, but one of those FU kind of offers, then they're gonna hold on to those. So, but the Dillingham house is there. That can be run as a bed and breakfast. It's zoned for it, and it's haunted.
And I understand that the Dillinghams had a lot of properties too, because I saw different places with their name attached to them
Yep.
along the Cape.
So they were a big family around the Sandwich area. They also were a big family in Fairhaven as well. There was an offshoot
really?
of their family here, and part of their family moved to Hawaii, to the Big Island. And so there's a lot of Dillingham properties out in Hawaii. Dillingham's a very big name in Hawaii. There's the Dillingham School and all this kind of stuff, and those places all have activity associated with them as well. So all these haunted Dillingham places all over the place. But that house in Sandwich, as far as I know, is still for sale, $495,000. So keep that one in mind anyway.
Oh, there's a few I'm going to keep in mind.
All right.
Like I say, I was hoping to get to you guys a lot sooner, but like I said, it'll be coming to a head in about a week.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out for you next week. We'll be here.
Oh, well, if it comes in next week, I'll probably be at the station most of the day.
All right. Hey, you know where to find me.
Oh, yeah, I know where to find everybody down there.
All right.
Okay, guys, you have a great weekend. And
You as
we'll
well.
be talking.
Take care.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, that's the mark with our update there, and I think we're going to have to call it a night now. We've gone pretty much overboard, so it's time that we kind of wrap things up and say goodnight to everybody. We will be back next Saturday night. As I said, we'll be here most weeks. There's a few things coming up where, I might be doing some traveling and stuff like that, but other than that, we'll be here each and every week. And also, the questions popped up a few times in the chat room. Will I be hosting Midnight in the Desert this week? I will not be. Dave, well, at least I'm not planned to be.
Yeah.
Dave will be there all of this week coming up. But then the week after that, he's going to be on the Chris Jericho cruise with Tim Dennis for the Beyond the Darkness portion of that cruise. So I'll be filling in for Dave on the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Dave will come back on the 24th. And for those of you who are Midnight in the Desert listeners, you already know this. He's going to have a big announcement to make on the 24th. So people have been asking me if I know what it is. I couldn't tell you what it is. So I'll be listening on the 24th just like everybody else. And I recommend if you can't listen to the show, you can subscribe to it. Go to midnightinthedesert.com. Subscribe, be a time traveler. It's $4.99 a month. You get every single episode that's ever happened to that show, going all the way back to Art Bell for just $4.99 a month, and it's delivered right to you as soon as the show is over. Keith just basically cleans up the audio a little bit, does what he has to do with the trimming off the music that we can't play, and then just sends it all off, and it's waiting right for you to listen. So you can subscribe at midnightinthedesert.com to follow along with that show. And, of course, our archives are always available as well for Spooky South Coast, wherever you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube as well. If you want to reach out to us at any point during the week, spookycrew at spookysouthcoast.com. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at SpookySC and on Instagram at Spooky_Southcoast. And really, if you want to help us spread the spooky word, we're fine with that too. You can tell all your friends about it. Bring them all here. Great time with the chat room every Saturday night with everybody. Thank you all for hanging out with us in the chat. I love the fact that we have a great little family in there, a real spooky crew that shows up every Saturday night and interacts. So until next time, for Matt, for Stephanie, I'm Tim. We want you all to stay spooktacular.